Alrighty, so Julie, let's talk about sound.
Let's do it.
So I want to start with a story because I think it will resonate with this particular topic. But I remember in the first session of TESOL, when I first met you, I could not figure out who you were aside from the fact that you had an American accent. And I was so confused. I was like, how is she like speaking with an American accent? But then I also thought, what is she doing at the University of Melbourne? I think that was like the first question that came to mind. And then
Because I'm American?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, oh, it must be a long way for her.
Yeah.
But then when you put on the next slide that you also spoke Korean, Japanese, and Chinese, I was like, woo! I think there was a part of me that was like, wow, she's so cool.
Okay. That's kind of weird to me because you grew up in such a multicultural, multilingual, super diverse city.
Didn't feel like it.
Why should that be something extraordinary for you?
I feel like I've only been exposed to Vietnamese and English.
Okay.
And to meet a multilingual person was I think it was something very exotic at the time, I think. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't think I've ever encountered like somebody that could speak so many languages, but also somebody that, would also like be in front of me, teaching me about language and the complexities of language in this time and space. Like it just didn't line up for me in that moment.
So you speak Vietnamese and English. Did you consider yourself as a multilingual?
No.
But you considered me as a multilingual because I spoke more?
Yeah.
We just had this conversation.
I know, about counting languages, right? And at the time, I judged you purely based upon sound. Like that was my first impression of you. And so obviously, sound, accents, they all have something to do with identity. And
so is this the word we want to use today, the indexicality that Cramps uses, right? Yeah. So that the sound points to social identities and that we hear an accent and instantly we judge their education, their origin, their class, their competence. So that seems to be a word that, kind of captures that.
Yep.
What was going on there.
It's so true. And I encountered that this morning at the airport, actually, as I was waiting in the Uber bay. And I was walking and waiting for my Uber, and there was just a car that was just sitting there idle. And the guy was like to me, hey, do you want to come in? And I was like, no. And I was like, oh, it sounds really dodgy. Like, I don't know if I want to go follow this person. Yeah. And then another person pulls up behind and was like, oh, you good? And I was like, you seem a bit more trustworthy, but at the same time, no. But it indexes like a lot more than just impressions and judgment, but also like, can you trust somebody? Are they competent? Are they not? If your life was in their hands, how would that impact you?
And I think that's where the orders of indexicality now are going to come into play, which we won't like skip over just now, but yes, all the supra-segmental features of the accent, the rhythm, the stress, the intonation, the things that sit above just the individual sounds, they become really important, right? They index something. And can I, just before we start this, then can I also go back to you just reminded me that first day in class. So that's what you were thinking. I was thinking actually, because you know how I have everybody's photos and I try to make the match, like, okay, so this person's name, because I want to try to learn the names very quickly. And I remember looking at your last name, your maiden name, which was Mack, M-A-C-K-C-H.
Yep.
And I was thinking, I don't know how to position this. Where's this person from? I mean, she looks Asian, but, and when she opens her mouth, she sounds really Aussie. And, like for me to remember students' names, I have to do that. I have to, I'm trying to make every association possible very, very quickly. So, I'm thinking about the sounds that you're producing, your face, your whole, the whole identity package. Yeah. And I'm looking at this last name I've never seen. Is this Chinese?
Wow.
And I've never seen actually an M-A-C-H. So That's interesting. That's even in that little encounter, which we didn't share with each other till like, I don't know, 10 years later. But clearly, that's how we're trying to suss each other out, you know?
So can we unpack it in a few videos? Because I feel like the more we look at it together, the more we can see how sound can index a particular person.
And I think like, especially at a time like now where in social media, there's so many performances that are short and people putting out their identities out there. I think this is the right time for us to be doing this kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's go into our first one.
Okay.
So we have a video here of Chinese Trump and Jimmy Bear. So Ryan Chen and I think Julie Lee. And they're using different personalities, using languages. So we'll watch it first and then we can unpack it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's press play.
This is how I sound like in English, kind of like a valley girl. I've actually never grew up in the US though.
I've never been to the US, but this is how we sound in English. It starts with one thing. I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard I try. I love Linkin Park. I love it.
我其实在北京长大的，
你
知道吗？
北京长大的吗？你这个你唬谁呢？你北京的吗？
是啊。
哎，师傅您好。有礼貌。
北京人有礼貌。제가 사실 한국 사람이에요. 그래서
I have no idea what she's talking about, but that's a beautiful language. Kimchi chuaheyo, sai chuaheyo. What about this one? He was famous.
I
Do you
don't know
this?
him.
You don't even know this guy? That's a huge disrespect to Korean culture, you know. 안녕하세요. 한국 친구들.
Oh, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
And that's not just like one language accents and things to point out. But
where do we start?
Oh, yes, where do we start? Maybe we'll need to think about, like, on the surface, what we're seeing is comedy, right? It's funny. But underneath, right, what are they doing by showing that they can that they speak Chinese and Korean, and I'm actually Korean. You didn't know, did you? So what am I indexing here? Like that you didn't know because I speak like a native speaker. So you had no idea.
Like how impressive.
Right,
Yeah.
Right? So there's the idea of prestige. I think that is connected to that switching of languages there and what they're saying. And yeah, at the end of the day, you know, look how what they're saying is look how native I sound.
So their accent is being used to, as you say, like claim status.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. So, you know, I don't know if that's an easy thing for people to grasp like that. You know, if you're looking at it, you're thinking it's funny. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. But in our literature, right, we would say like, okay, we need to like break these terms and these ideas, and we need to be critical of them and problematize it. But multilinguals themselves are going out there and saying, well, look how native I am, right? And let's have a bit of fun with that, right? It's doing something. That's the thing that we want to see, right? So what is it doing? I think you're right. It's trying to claim that status in an indirect, funny way, right? But the way in which also Chinese Trump does it is those super segmental features.
That's right.
You know, the vowels, the consonants. You know, he just hits it on the nail, just individual sounds, because he's doing it with a certain kind of melody, and he nails the melody just perfect, like China, you know, right? Like he just gets, and because he's also Chinese, him doing that doesn't seem like, you know, it's something rude or offensive or, you know.
But it's amazing how he's doing it in Chinese, but like with an American, like feel like you get the feeling.
And the fact that he's never lived in the States, right?
Yeah.
But again, isn't it those pieces of information that's making people go like, wow, you never lived in the States and you could do that? Right? So it increases the value of what you're doing. And these things are all related to language, you know? Yeah. They're not just, it's not just a random thing. They're doing something very deliberate.
Yeah. As much as you might try to claim status, there are moments where your accent, as you say, like it denies you status. It does not have that same impression, that same value, that same, wow, like that's amazing, right? And I think we're going to look at the next one now with Ban Ki-moon.
Yeah, let's have a look at that.
Your Excellency, Espen Barth Eide, Foreign Minister of Norway, Your Excellency, Minister for Women's Rights of the French Republic, Najat Vallaud-Belkacem, Excellencies, distinguished friends, I'm pleased to greet the participants in this important conference. We should all be outraged when people suffer discrimination, assault, and even murder, simply because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. We should all speak out when someone is arrested and imprisoned because of who they love or how they look. This is one of the great neglected human rights challenges.
A clip that I saw while I was in Korea. I'm watching a channel called EBS, and they were showing a research project by scholars who were trying to understand how Koreans understood Korean accents when people were speaking English. And so they didn't play that video in front of them. They got a whole bunch of Westerners as well as Koreans, and they just played the sound. And then they asked in individually and in focus groups, what did you think about that speaker? And none of them knew that was Ban Ki-moon, and it was really interesting to hear what they said about the Koreans, or they said things about it sounds very rigid, or if I was teaching my kid English, I wouldn't go to a teacher like that who had that kind of accent. And various other things that were really, really interesting. And also more interestingly is probably that the Westerners were all was so fluent and, was able to express himself.
Really?
And
Okay.
It was wonderful,
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, it starts to turn the table a bit, right? You start to think, okay, these perceptions that we have about accents, without looking at somebody or knowing their status, we just by listening to their accent or how they sound, we then deny them that status, and this is like the UN Secretary General.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about even just a normal politician, So I thought that so what, I guess the question here becomes also about why is it that in certain contexts that's okay and that's not okay, or people can do various things. And came across this article by Joseph Park and Lionel Wee, who talked about language appropriations. I mean, we normally talk about cultural appropriations, but language appropriations. And they talked about something called an autonomous market and a unified market. So I guess in the unified markets, the point is that these are usually the educational institutions, media, those kinds of formal places where you have one standard and everybody is measured according to that standard. So in a context like that, which is Ban Ki-moon's context, people are judging according to a certain kind of, ideology or standard that they're working from. And then in the autonomous market, and this would be places like social media, and art, the arts, let's say music industry, like hip hop or things like that. It means that you're expected to play. The market asks you to break those rules and play with them, and that then means that the more clever you are in your play, the more probably likes you're going to have, or it's going to be funny or not, or so so I think that's quite an interesting thing about, like, it's never just one way. These accents, I think, in even these two examples, can do quite different things. But then we really have to think about the market, that and the market is not where we're like exchanging money, but the symbolic value of things, right?
And what's interesting is like the norms, as you say, within those markets, right? Like we see with Ban Ki-moon, like the politics and the institutional, I guess, expectations of, how a person should speak at the United Nations. Like somebody would project those particular native speaker norms, but then you have people like Uncle Roger who completely go the other way. Like, can we watch a few videos and unpack
let's
that?
look at that.
I think the people who also think Uncle Roger shouldn't have an accent, they're essentially saying that Uncle Roger should sound white, which is very problematic in itself. Asians have accents, and sometimes we want to do a character with an accent, and that character, like Uncle Roger without an accent, it just wouldn't be right.
Yeah.
So it goes right back to So it goes right back to in that Uncle Roger is on social media, and it goes back to in that autonomous market. It makes sense to do that. It doesn't make sense to, I don't know, as he says, sound white. Even in his normal speech, I'm not sure that I necessarily think that he sounds white, but I know what he's saying. So he's doing something else there, which is the same thing that was it Marcello Hernandez?
Yeah.
Spanish. I think his parents might be from the Dominican Republic. Yeah. And so he's
Cuba.
speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
He says himself too that he deliberately uses that because that's actually a resource for him. Right. Yeah.
I actually have a video,
okay.
a little snippet. I don't think I
let's have a
showed you
look.
this earlier,
Yeah.
but this is one of his snippets in one of his comedy shows.
Took a Spanish class. The teacher's name was Megan Thornton. I walk into this class. She's like, "Hola, estudiantes." She got the first kid to introduce himself to the class. Came up with so much confidence. He was like, "Hola, mi nombre es Jake, and yo soy from Cincinnati. And mi comida favorito is pizza." My teacher looks at Jake and goes, "Jake was incredible." Something came over me. I don't even know what happened. All I know is that as soon as Jake stopped talking, I went, "Watch this." She picked me. She was like, "Marcelo, por favor." I was like, "Yo me llamo Marcello Hernandez, y yo soy de Miami. Mi comida favorita es arroz con frijoles con plátano maduro, y también me gusta el pollo empanizado, por favor, al final." And then Megan goes, "Did you guys hear that? That is your new teacher."
There's so much going on in this one, but okay. So the first point we should just cover, though, is both in the Uncle Roger one and in the Hernandez one, is the fact that they, again, multilinguals themselves will reclaim. We have the example of claiming, being denied, but they themselves can also reclaim something that may be seen as taboo. And I think something very interesting in this example with Hernandez is the way he's also doing this is not just about putting on the accent, which he's quite fluent in, but switching in and out of very fluidly the, let's say, just for the sake of talking about this, the normal accent with the Spanish and moving in and out, because that also indexes his context of being what Dominican Republican, Hispanic or Spanish, English speaker. So he's actually something that, like translanguaging has been, or code switching has been seen as something that is deficient. He's actually reclaiming that more than, it's just my home language that I'm trying to reclaim. He's playing with that, and he's also saying, I do translanguage, and translanguaging is really cool. So he's making translanguaging really cool through this autonomous market.
That's incredible. Like the richness of just sound. I think when I first encountered this module, without even looking at any of the like planning that we had done, I just thought, oh, sound, like it's sound, noise, right? Like it just comes out of people.
Yeah.
But clearly it does something to people. It allows people to be denied, to access, to claim status, to reclaim status. Like,
But let's just go back to the example you said with the drivers today, right? So if we think about what I just mentioned before, orders of indexicality, let's just think about that, because there are first order, second order, third order. Like the first order is the sound that you heard, right? Whatever they said. And then I was like, okay. And then the second order is like, that's like kind of now like linking you to something, danger.
Yeah.
Or like, or something, right?
Yeah.
And then the third order would then be, if that's just normalized and naturalized, and we no longer think it's automatic. It's like, oh, that accent? No. Danger, no. Right?
Yeah.
And you went anywhere in the world and you heard that and you're like, of course we would not do that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
But then when the second guy pulled up and was like, oh, are you good, mate? I thought, is this a normal thing? Am I just like overthinking this? But then I actually thought about this episode that we were going to do on sound, and I was like, wow, I just made a full judgment impression to deny somebody on the basis of sound.
that's right. And in the same way, like just another just very simple example is like I've just had a thought about like the way we think about different languages. So Vietnamese sounds to some people in a certain way, right? Korean in a certain way. Like Korean I used to be very embarrassed to say any Korean word ever. And then, K-drama, K-pop, all these things come into play. And now Korea is cool. It's cool to be Korean, and Korean words are cool, and everything that we eat is cool. Like, it's completely changed the, thing, right? And that's just the same way. Like, even if you took a language like French, and we have the ways in which we think about French, like, somebody speaks French, you're like, it speaks French. And then you're like, you must eat caviar and wine for lunch every day, and then that thing becomes a normal thing. So like all French people are sophisticated, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are just, silly examples, but like, that's just how quickly, these ideas, it's all attached to, certain kinds of ways of thinking about something. And then if you never get education or any kind of explicit understanding of it, you will always be thinking like that. Of course, at some point you might think differently, but this is where the real power of language education is, and not just the technical. If you're just doing the technical, it's as you said, you just said, oh yeah, I thought we're just going to talk about sound. Sound is just sound. What am I going to say about it? It's like, there's a lot to say about that. I mean, we'd be here all day talking about, examples, right? So this is why these concepts, right? The suprasegmental features that we talked about, the indexicality,
and the orders of
indexicality, and then in order to talk about context, we don't just talk about context, but we have to really name it. Like in the autonomous market, that may be okay. In the unified market, that may be harder.